Welcome to the continuation of The Haunted Taxi. Please do well to subscribe for the channel growth.
Kofi screamed and tried to pull away, but the hand held tight, pulling him down.
He struggled, kicking and shouting, but the more he fought, the deeper he sank into the ground. The last thing
Kofi saw was the torchlight flickering,
and then everything went dark. Kofi felt his body being pulled deeper into the cold, dark earth.
The pressure around his chest tightened, and he gasped for air, but there was none.
His mind raced with panic.
He tried to scream, but his voice was swallowed by the heavy darkness. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. Kofi wasn't sinking anymore. Instead, he felt weightless, floating in a strange, silent void.
Slowly, he opened his eyes.
But the world around him was nothing like he'd ever seen before.
He was in a place that felt both ancient and otherworldly, a space with no sky.
No ground, just swirling shadows and whispering voices. The air was thick with a feeling of dread. Where am I? Kofi thought aloud,
his voice sounding small in the endless expanse. A
faint light appeared in the distance, growing brighter as it floated towards him. As it came closer, Kofi saw the figure from before, the one with the burning torch. The figure still wore its dark cloak.
But this time, Kofi could see its face clearly. It was not human. Its skin was a dull grey, its eyes empty sockets.
And yet it looked directly at Kofi, as if it could see straight into his soul.
You are in the place between worlds,
the figure said in a low, hollow voice.
This is where those lost in the taxi.
Come, you do not belong to the world of the living anymore.
Kofi's heart raced. No, this can't be.
I have to go back.
I don't belong here.
The figure shook its head slowly. Once you enter the cursed taxi, your fate is sealed. The others who were taken are already part of this world. Kofi looked around frantically, and that's when he saw them. Shadows, figures like him,
floating in the distance, trapped, their faces twisted in fear and sorrow. They were the missing people, the ones who had entered the taxi and never returned. Despair began to settle in his chest,
but Kofi wasn't ready to give up. There must be a way out. Please, I need to go back home. The figure watched him silently for a long
moment before finally speaking. There is one way, but it comes with a cost.
Kofi's breath caught. What is it? I'll do anything. The figure stepped closer, its empty eyes narrowing. If you return to the living world, you will not be the same. You will carry the curse with you. It will live inside you.
And others will pay the price for your return.
Kofi hesitated. What do you mean? The figure leaned closer, its voice a chilling whisper. The curse must pass on to someone else. If you leave this place, another will take your place. Someone from your world. And when the time comes, you must bring them to the taxi. Kofi's heart pounded. He couldn't believe he could doom someone else. But the thought of never seeing his family again, never feeling the warmth of the sun or hearing the sounds of the city, it was unbearable. The figure extended its hand. Choose. Kofi stood frozen,
torn between his desire to escape and the terrible price he would have to pay. After what felt like an eternity, he reached out and grasped the figure's cold hand.
Take me back, Kofi whispered, his voice trembling.
The moment their hands touched, the world around him began to spin.
The shadows twisted and folded in on themselves,
and Kofi felt a powerful force pulling him upward,
as if he was being lifted out of a deep, endless pit.
The voices of the lost souls faded into the distance, replaced by the familiar sounds of the city.
Kofi's eyes flew open, and he found himself standing on a busy street in Nairobi. The rain had stopped, and the early morning sun was rising over the horizon. People bustled around him, unaware of where he had been for a moment. Kofi thought it had all been a dream, but when he looked down at his hands, they were shaking, and his heart was still pounding in his chest. He was back. But something felt wrong. The city looked the same.
Yet Kofi couldn't shake the feeling that something dark had followed him. He glanced around nervously, expecting to see the figure from the void watching him. But the streets were normal, filled with life and noise. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart.
Maybe it was over. Maybe he had escaped the curse.
But as he walked, he felt a strange weight in his chest, a deep, dark presence that wasn't there before. He ignored it at first, but the feeling grew stronger with every step he took. That night, as Kofi lay in bed, the nightmares began. He dreamed of the taxi, of the figure, of the endless shadows waiting in the void.
Every night,
the dreams became more vivid, more real,
until Kofi could hardly tell the difference between waking and sleeping. Weeks passed, and Kofi started noticing people he spoke to. Friends.
Strangers would sometimes glance over their shoulders as if they sensed something following them.
Some of them started complaining of hearing footsteps in the dark or seeing a strange taxi waiting outside their homes late at night.
Then one day, Kofi received a phone call.
It was his best friend Isaac. His voice was shaky, filled with fear. Kofi, something weird is happening.
I keep seeing this taxi outside my house, but when I get close, it disappears.
Kofi's blood ran cold.
The curse had begun to spread. He knew what he had to do.
The figure's words echoed in his mind. When the time comes,
You must bring them to the taxi.
the next evening, Kofi met Isaac at their usual spot.
Trying to act normal, trying to hide the dread building inside him. They laughed, talked about old times.
But the weight of what Kofi had to do sat heavy on his chest.
As they said their goodbyes,
Kofi saw the familiar headlights of the taxi appear in the distance, waiting in the shadows.
his heart pounded in his chest. He knew what would happen next.
Kofi, I think I'll take a taxi tonight, Isaac said casually, looking down the street. Kofi's breath caught. No, Isaac. Wait. But it was too late. Isaac raised his hand to flag the taxi down, stepping closer to the street. Kofi's breath caught.
But it was too late. The taxi pulled up silently.
Isaac turned to Kofi with a smile, unaware of the doom that awaited him. See you later, man. Kofi's voice caught in his throat as he watched Isaac climb into the back seat. The door clicked shut, and the taxi drove off into the night,
Disappearing into the darkness.
Kofi stood frozen, his heart heavy with guilt and fear.
He knew the curse had passed to Isaac, and soon.
The cycle would continue, but deep down, Kofi couldn't shake the feeling that his time hadn't truly run out yet. He couldn't just stand there and wait for the inevitable. He couldn't go home.
He had to find a way to stop this curse before it claimed more lives. Did you think Kofi can stop the course? Find out in the next episode. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more.